Why are you putting in all this effort and spending 10 grand a month on these agencies to help you? And it will look great, don't get me wrong, but then sound's just an afterthought again. Welcome to the Hear Me Out podcast. We're a creative music agency specializing in helping brands use sound strategically. We've helped brands with combined revenue well into the £1 billion use sound strategically. This is the first episode in a 10-part series where we're going to be talking about the misconceptions when it comes to sonic branding. And George is going to give us our first misconception to discuss, which is...
Well, the question is sonic branding just a jingle? It's a 10-part series, and I'm going to throw some curveballs in your direction over the 10. So We're starting with the biggest one, which is, sonic branding. Is it just a jingle?
Yeah, and I guess that's a great spot to start talking about sonic branding in general and how we would see sonic branding. We are slightly different to some sonic branding agencies, I think, in our approach. I know some are aligned with our way of thinking, but in terms of Hear Me Out, we're always thinking of sonic branding as anywhere a brand uses sound. Unless you are a brand that has no sound at all, then you have
You'll be lying.
Yeah,
You'll be lying.
You'd be a liar, firstly. And you have sonic branding already because it's music you use on your social media content. It's if you use any sounds in a podcast. It's if you have a sonic logo. It's if you have any ad campaigns. It's if you have a physical premises and what music is playing inside. To get really deep, as George and I were discussing earlier, you could even construe that the sound that your actual restaurant or physical location makes in terms of interacting with, inanimate objects is part of your sonic branding, but that's not what we will discuss in the first episode.
Episode 224. Yeah. How are your chairs sound in your cafe?
How your chairs impact your customers' perception of you and sound.
And I will say as well, we'll break down a lot of these terms. We're very aware that, the term sonic branding is very new to a lot of people. You may have discovered this podcast because you heard somebody like Mark Ritson or Rory Sutherland talking about it. Or you may have accidentally discovered it whilst you were searching for something completely different in the branding and marketing world. So we will tap into those as the podcast goes on. And
or Sonic the Hedgehog. That seems to pops up a lot in search engines still. Such is the low search volume that I'm always dazzled by how quickly that little blue bastard comes up in Google keyword searches. We're spending so much time trying to get in Google keyword searches.
We are. And there's two reasons, I guess, why we started this podcast in the first place. Was one, we can't find any sonic branding podcasts in our search because we kept finding Sonic the Hedgehog podcast instead. But we couldn't find any sonic branding podcasts. We have so many interesting conversations, just you and I on Zoom. We figured, let's take this onto a different platform and share our conversations with the world. So that was another reason for starting the podcast. Any other reason for the starting the podcast, Luke, that you can think of?
I mean, I think the first season that we're doing is just because of how many conversations we have with CMOs, senior brand managers, category managers, procurement, etc., who are really at the initial stages. Everyone understands how powerful music is. That's almost a given. It's almost such a given that it's forgotten, if that makes sense.
I was just about to say that. I agree. I totally agree.
And then as soon as we start to highlight the power of sound, everyone's like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Why are we not using this with our brand? This is going to be so powerful. And so I think that's one of the main reasons why we started it as well, because everyone's on different parts of their journey. And as we speak to people are ready to start in a month, 3 months. They're thinking about some kind of rebrand or refresh or relaunch in 6 or 8 months. So it's like, what better way to start expanding the knowledge than these podcasts?
Totally agree. And one thing we want to always hit home is that we forget very often to even talk about the fact that we are music producers. That's how we started in this industry, as music producers for artists, for record labels. We have a lot of musical knowledge, both culturally and just technically on how to get something done from an idea into a sound. So it's a good opportunity, I think, for us to talk about our ideas, the process, like how do we as musicians also debunk some of the questions, some of the challenges of like, how did Netflix get their sound designed and roll that out, distribute that into the world, etc. I think we have quite an interesting angle that a lot of agencies don't have, in that we both run the company. We both have those brief conversations. We have those, conversations about briefs, not very short conversations.
Rarely have short conversations, George.
With brands, and then how that ends up as a sound. We absolutely know every part of that process because we are the ones creating it. And I think we were talking earlier about a similar challenge that we had as music producers, was that with artists and record labels, we're trying to find the sound of those artists. We're trying to explore, who are they about? What stories do they want to tell? How does that translate successfully into sound? And now we do the same thing for brands. So it's quite an interesting journey in itself.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because artists think about it so much more, with such a higher level of priority in terms of, I've worked with artists where they're like, oh, does this sound too different to the last song that we did? Will this sit on a body of work? And when people are choosing songs, but yet with brands, we rarely see that sense of awareness and appearance from like a holistic. Actually, I've never thought about it from this, but a great way of thinking about it for brands would be like, all right, cool. So you've got, okay, if you're a new artist, you always get recommended that you're going to start with a single and then move up to an EP, let's say.
Yeah.
So as a brand, if you were starting your sonic branding journey, thinking of it as like an EP. So, okay, what are the last 5 bits of large content that we put out? Okay, let's get those musical tracks that we maybe, dare I say, did some library music or maybe licensed something or maybe had one bespoke thing done. Do they work together? Like if this was a musical artist and you listened to their EP and the next song came on, would you be like, what the hell is this doing here?
Yeah. Or could my social media be an album? Would it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah,
that
exactly.
approach I think would be interesting. Like if I look at the last 10, what's an average album nowadays? 10 to 12 tracks?
10 to 12, I'd say still, yeah.
So if I took the last 10 posts on my socials, would it work as an album? Or would there be a song in there where you're like, whoa, hold on a second. That doesn't sound like us. That's an interest. We've never actually put it out into the world that way. We should speak to.
We should remember that because I think that'd be a really interesting way to frame it, because I think a lot of people listening that work in brands have that as a touch point. I think as we talk about it all the time, and we will continue to talk about it, it's as soon as you start to talk about sonic branding in a language that business understands, because sound is so often just discussed emotionally, as it should be because of its innate emotional power. But when it's then illuminating somebody to the business power, the translation of that emotion into like a business objective, I suppose, is where people seem to really resonate with it.
Totally agree. And I think those everyday examples it opens your eyes as to how many brands are doing it and are utilizing it. Netflix is always the example that comes up when we first mention sonic branding to people. They're like, oh, like the Netflix thing, or oh, like McDonald's with the ba-da-ba-ba-ba. There are brands that have done it for years and years. And yesterday we had a great conversation about on the 100-year cycle, where 100 years ago, it was all about sound because everything was radio. We didn't have screens in the same way that we have now at home. So we've gone this full circle of like developing screens, developing TV, developing film, now social media. And here we are recording a podcast focusing on sound. And I think sound is just each year on the rise on how many brands are paying attention to it as a tool, an underutilized tool that's unlocking so much value for them. And I just, you can't turn your ears off. Yeah. That cross advertising, that cross marketing you can get. We always talk about somebody listening to something on the phone on the bus or on a train, and somebody's always got their volume up, and that person's essentially advertising whatever they're watching or doing to the carriage. And I think that full 100-year cycle is just a really interesting moment in time for us as a society, as humans, that we're back to the importance of sound.
It's crazy. I'm having a look online. When you say the phrase "can't turn your ears off," how is that not an album title from somebody? That seems like, you know what I mean? Like if the Chemical Brothers released an album and it was called "Can't Turn Your Ears Off," it'd just be full of fucking absolute.
Shame we've already named the podcast.
bangers. Ooh, welcome to Hear Me Out. Can't turn your ears off. I like that. Okay, so hold on. Something I want to touch back on, which links in with the misconception about sound being a jingle and with your point there about Netflix. I had an idea for a cool piece of content that I think we should do to show the power of sonic logos.
Yep. I'm all ears.
Find an ad that is where they say Netflix in it, and then we use the word Netflix, but we use it like it's a swear word, and we replace it with a da-dum. So it's like, oh, do you want to watch da-dum tonight? Oh yeah, I heard there was this new show on da-dum or something.
And see if people can work out the brand.
People are like, what is the brand that you're doing here? And that would intrinsically show the value of a sonic logo in particular that is consistently used and unique and creative.
So is that your first, I mean, it's branding and marketing podcast. Is that your first call to action for the listeners, is to go to your LinkedIn within the next month and find that exact video you're about to create?
Perfect. Exactly. I don't know if I need to I might even try to get AI to create the ad, because I don't know if there's any ad. I haven't looked yet. I only had the idea at 3 a.m. this morning. But I thought that would be a cool one. And it links in with the misconception about it being a jingle, because as we discussed earlier, from our awareness, the da-dum of Netflix could be seen as a jingle, but I think it's more of a sonic logo. And I would say, the separation between the two, I'd say, is a different time. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there is a separation. I don't know if you need a separation, but I know that the Netflix one connects with people and sounds cool because it's different and unique, and it's not relying on a small melodic motif.
Yeah, it's a distinct sound. It's hard to actually, you can mimic it, but you can't sing it.
Yeah.
But you can mimic it in terms of like sound effects. Like you can't, if you did that to someone.
Because it's a rhythmical one, really, is the motif with
Netflix. It's and the low, like it's like if you did that to most people that own a television, they would probably give a guess at Netflix.
Yeah,
more than not. Anyway, and just to bring it back round as well, I think we should explain sonic brand, like the definition of sonic branding as opposed to like a sonic logo as well.
Yeah.
Because we see a lot of people saying, oh, have you got sonic branding? Or we're interested in getting our own sonic branding. And they're referring to just the logo.
Yes.
It's just so sonic logo. Let's think about McDonald's, or Netflix, they are, I consider, sonic logos. It's an audio version of your visual logo, basically.
And now that you say that, though, it does make sense why people consider that to be sonic branding, because traditionally those are accompanied by the brand's visual branding.
Yeah.
And it's that one almost static, well, it is pretty much always a static image that your branding is, that is seen as your branding. Obviously, it's got a lot of different touch points because it's visual, so it can be put in your stores. You know, it can be put on billboards, etc. So I do get why people think it's this, why that is such a...
I totally agree. And I also think I reckon most people that come around to hearing the term sonic branding have probably either gone to do research or had somebody come to them and say, we need to get this sorted, or this is something we should develop because of that missing piece. Because they've got an animated logo, or maybe they've got a logo that maybe they're developing an ad, TV ad, and everything's kind of there, but they're noticing the last few times the music just fades out really quickly. There's not actually like a defining moment to make you go, that brand, especially when everyone's down on their phones when TV adverts are on TV. It's like, what's the moment where you go, I know who this is.
Yeah. So,
and I reckon that the first touch point for people to discover sonic branding is most likely going to be the logo. Not thinking about the necessarily.
Do you think
the
that
deeper
should
level.
be like if I was a brand and I was listening to this, and I've got a brand and I specialize in organic feed for urban monkeys, and I'm desperate to get into sonic branding, and I come to you at Hear Me Out, and I'm like, I don't know anything about sonic branding. You tell me where we should start. I'm really into it. Would you say, I'm really big on social media. I put out loads of content. I've got some ads that are running. Do you think the first step would be a sonic logo? Or would you suggest something different?
No, I think most people think about sonic branding for the first time, or discover sonic branding for the first time because they've thought about a sonic logo. That's like seems to be the most wildly, well, right now there's definitely a rise in CMOs, brand managers talking about sonic logos, which is great. I think we always take the people through the first step of like doing the audit. How are you already using sound? If you've got a big social media following and you're doing a lot of content already, what music are you using already? Like what does your brand already sound like? You may not be aware that it already sounds like something, but exactly. It will do. And quite often, if you're trying to target an 18 to 25-year-old audience, but yet you're using the Bee Gees, Elton John. I spoke to someone the other day, they'd never heard of Elton John, and I was like, wow, we're really into a next era of humans now.
You're ticking a different box on that age form now, aren't you?
Exactly. So I'm like, because that does then paint a picture. If you're trying to sell shoes to an 18-year-old and you're using like an Elton John track or the Bee Gees or something because you're trying to be stylistically cool. Now, granted, some of these songs come back round. Was it Kate Bush that was in Stranger Things and that kicked off again? But I think that had the context to paint the right picture for that track, if that makes sense. So I think that's a really hard one to analyze because I do understand that there's cycles of songs that come round, but normally it's because of a different cultural moment rather than just the song happens to, for some reason, have kicked off on Spotify again. There's always an external implication as to why that started again. But
so where am I starting?
Yeah. Say again?
So where are we starting? With my organic monkey feed for the urban environment. What's the first point of call? Yeah. What's gonna
brand
have the
questionnaire.
No, but okay.
Brand questionnaire, and then getting to a point where you actually build a strategy. So figuring out who you're trying to speak to, demographic, etc. Because if you once you've got the strategy down, and by strategy that could be where the music's going to be placed, it could be touch points, but I'm thinking more importantly, once you establish really who you're trying to connect with on those different platforms, or just generally as a brand, most importantly, you could start doing a lot of the work yourself.
That's more what I was trying to get at. I was sort of, I'm not going to say everyone knows what we do, but as with, any new piece of work, you're going to do your research, you're going to have your questions, you're going to understand the crux of what a brand is trying to get across. But what I was thinking as soon as I'd asked the question is where you're already using sound is the quickest win and exploration into it. Like then comparing what you found in the research to what you are using, is there a disconnect there? That's an easy one to sort of close to show the impact.
Yeah.
And then I guess that ties in really nicely with, and if you are a brand manager or CMO wanting to explore it, send us an email if you want to talk about it more. We're always up for chatting to new brands, etc. And it sort of ties in with the misconception about sonic branding just being a jingle, because if you are using music on your social media, even if you were just picking it off of Instagram, a business account, then that is part of your sonic branding. And if you are not using it strategically and from a cohesive, perspective, or from a perspective of making it cohesive, then you are potentially damaging your brand. And
that's the reality. That's the reality, is that you could be putting all this work into, we've been speaking to companies about running some of our social media. We know the cost that goes into just purely posting it and running it.
Exactly. It's a great point.
Let alone then actually the creation of that content as well. So you put all this money into it to speak to a certain audience, to sell a certain product, to launch a new event, whatever it might be. And in an instant second, you could be and it's not that you're turning people off where they're like, oh, what is that noise? It's just like subconsciously you kind of think, let's go use the 18-year-old with the trainer, like sneakers, or wherever you are listening in the world. I don't know why that came to my head, but I just felt like I needed to say trainers.
Sneakers, like kids with their sneakers.
Sneakers. But wherever, sorry, hang on, I've lost my train of thought now. So 18-year-olds with the trainer sale, it's not that they're going to be going, oh, what is this Elton John track? Or what is this song that I don't know? It's just subconsciously telling them that this shoe isn't necessarily for them. And that's the danger. You don't, the end listener, the end viewer, the end audience member doesn't even know they're not
Turned
consciously making the decision to turn to be like, that's not for me. They 100%. Just don't connect.
Well, it's that Caltech, the research they did at the American West Coast Caltech University, where they found that sound, your brain is influenced by sound. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's something like 1,000 times quicker than visuals. It may even be 1,000,000 times quicker. It was a crazy stat. I'd have to pull it back up. But you're already making emotional decisions based on sound before you've even been able to think about it. Mm-hmm. And if you let that sink in, that's insane. And the reason for what you just said of it's already having an impact, you don't know why, but it's not great because it's happening before your eyes. It's happening before what your brain is processing through your eyes can even discern what it is. The sound of it has already had an impact. And to that point, just so I don't forget, in terms of the marketing agencies, if you are speaking to any of these marketing agencies as a brand owner, if they're not bringing up sound to you as very high on the priority list, if not level with the way that the visuals are going to look, then you should definitely question working with them. Because some of the people that we've spoken to, they're just like, oh yeah, we use trending sounds that we think are going to work here. And it's like, red flag, turn around. Like, what? Why are you putting in all this effort and spending 10 grand a month on these agencies to help you? And it will look great, don't get me wrong, but then sound's just an afterthought again.
Well, and 10 grand and the rest. I mean, that's the scary thing when you actually start adding it
monthly as well, isn't it? It's not even.
And that's monthly. Yeah. And just to clarify, when you're saying about like the trending sounds, there are good ways to use trending sounds.
Of course. Yeah.
But there are so many trending sounds out there. You don't need to just choose the trap song that's on the top of that playlist. In fact, we helped a company, Chiselwood, do a strategy for their socials. And I spoke to them the other day. I haven't even given you an update of this. So this is live. Their trending songs algorithm now is completely within like the sounds that they want for their brand. Cool. So they don't even need to be doing like the hard work of, we created like a ChatGPT type, search prompt system that would allow them to, discover new music, but keep it on brand, etc. Now the algorithm has adapted itself so much so that there's great tracks now that's being suggested. So now they're time saving off the back of that. Wow. That was like 2-3 hours. Yeah. That was like 2-3 hours a week of just searching for the song, not including the actual posting time and putting that post together.
Yeah. And
so that in itself is a good time saver.
And that's the thing. If you're a brand manager and you're trying to start out, then even just that sort of process can be so helpful in terms of starting to align and get some consistency with your posts. Obviously, you need to understand what you're going for, and therein lies the nuance in terms of, a lot of people use sounds that they like, but you really want to be using sound. Really, you want to have enough awareness that if you love country music, but your audience is just so enamored and connected with your brand through heavy metal, you have to use heavy metal. It doesn't matter if it kills your country sensibilities and your good old redneck boy mentality. You got to do it. That's what you have to do. But you got to have that awareness and bravery to do it.
And it can't just be music that you like. It's got to be strategic.
That's what I mean. It can't be music it could be music that you like, but as long as you've done the strategy and the
exactly, that's the double win. If you end up, if it ends up that the research points towards your favorite kind of music, that's just a double win. That just makes your life much more enjoyable when you're putting stuff out. And it's rare that you would have like such a juxtaposition of like your audience should be listening, like you should be putting heavy metal against your posts, but you love like Taylor Swift. Like that would be a rare, if you've managed to create a brand that is polar opposite of your cultural preferences, that's quite impressive.
But it's also creating, but I would counter that with not everyone is creating the brand. So, you could be a brand manager. So you could work within, under the Heineken umbrella or the AB umbrella or any of these large ones. And you could really like one. You'll see it all the time. Actually, one of our favorite stories is we've all been to like a nice wine bar somewhere, and there's somebody working there that's just been given control of the playlist. And you walk in and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? What is this music playing? Firstly, why is it so loud? And why are they playing like heavy rock or like some 2000s gangster rap from California? Like that doesn't go well with Brie. I don't care who you are.
Before I forget, one thing, and I need to get the actual stats and numbers on this just for our sake, but their watch time has increased. Talking about Chiselwood here with the right music
great.
now.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah. Their watch time has increased and their view count has quite obviously risen since we started implementing this. And I'm assuming the algorithm is now favoring them because people are watching their videos for longer, probably because they can just bear it longer because it's the right music. And it wasn't they were using like horrendously off music to their brand, but it was certainly like leaning towards like choosing the trending songs for each platform because that's what they felt they needed to be doing as the strategy, rather than thinking, hang on, we can do the trending song strategy, but with a strategy behind that.
And there's the nuance is you can be kind of close. You know, it's like you can make some nice food and it can be like a slow cooked beef ragu bolognese, a little bit more salt in there at the end, a little squeeze of lime or something. That just elevates it, takes it to the next thing. Like you kind of know what you're doing. You're sort of close. Yeah. Hey, it looks like a bolognese. I bet it tastes like a bolognese. But then it's like that extra little bit of refinement and awareness is what can then all of a sudden separate you from a crappy Italian down the road. I
agree. And if you're still listening, anyone that is still listening to the podcast now, you appreciate the nuances of those little details, but the big
Everyone's
difference that those things can make. Because I think that is where sonic branding really comes into it. Like we can give as many stats as possible. It was one you sent out this morning to someone in a conversation. It was like 96% retention rate increase when you have your own sonic branding and like your own sound strategy. The other one was, what was it? You had one in your post, 46. I'm going to have to find it because it was good. It was like a solid.
I just make all those up.
It was 40. Oh, hang on. How do I find your profile from here? Why can I find your profile when I don't want to find it, but when I want to find it quickly, I never can?
My profile. Absolute stalker.
There we go. You've got a new profile view now on your LinkedIn. Yes. So you said 46% boost in consumer favorability because of the originality of having their own sound. Like those numbers are crazy, and we can give those kind of numbers all day long. But if somebody doesn't appreciate the nuances of these little tweaks and differences, I think that's the difference between people that do really well on social media is because they're testing like 10 thumbnails, whereas most people would just choose a frame in a video and like be like, that will do. And you know, I'm absolutely guilty of that as well. But I understand the difference in those tiny little details and like the testing and the little tweaks and like shaving a couple of seconds off your intro because that's going to keep people hooked in, you know, all those little details. That's what we're talking about with these sound changes is those little tweaks in your process could genuinely give you 20% more revenue in a year just because you've gained trust and you've convinced people that, you know, they're your vibe, they're your tribe, whoever it is you're speaking to.
Yeah, and therein lies, I think what's huge, and I think the thing that people maybe sometimes overlook is, okay, so if you're saying this increases sales by 20% or brand recall or whatever, and I can figure out what that is as a percentage of my overall revenue, all of a sudden, if you're sitting down, you're like, do I really need to refine this for an extra, do I really need to spend 2 hours extra on this small, tiny bit? If you can then be thinking, oh, this is actually going to bring in an extra, this one post could increase by 100 grand, 200 grand, you know, £1 million or whatever it might be. You know, we're just throwing out random numbers here, but I think then it's quantifiable. And I think with us, particularly in our side of the industry where people think sonic branding's just pretty sounds that are nice to have, it's that understanding and awareness of it being a tool to increase brand value. And when you start to present it to people who have to account for budgets, they have to justify their spend, that's when it starts to, I think, really connect and people seem to cross over into the converted camp of, actually, we've already got all our branding. We've already got our copy all nailed. You know, sound can unlock value that only sound can. You know, that's our whole tagline, isn't it? You know, unlocking value that only sound can, because if you completely exasperated? No, that's the right word. If you've basically explored every way you can unlock value in your brand and refined it and explored it, but you haven't done sound, then it's untapped and you've got so much extra that you can to get that competitive edge. So I think it's exciting. And
there's so many different layers. Yeah, it's really exciting. And, you know, we generally have worked with big brands, Sky Bingo, you know, social media guy, I can't announce just yet, but 350 million views a month. That kind of level, those little tiny tweaks will make a big difference. But then at the same time, like I mentioned Chiselwood, their strategy has made an impact already, and all we've done with them is the strategy side.
Well, so that cost like a few £1,000. Like that's not even a huge investment for this.
And that's done now. They know they're not wasting any more time, cash, marketing budget, etc. So I think that's the beauty of sonic branding is, well, I'm sure we'll tap into it later on one of these other hint on one of these other 10 misconceptions, but there really is a huge scale on sonic branding, and I'm excited that we're part of this ever growing conversation around sound and a new marketing tool that generally people are really excited about when they discover it and find more about it. So I think we should wrap up on that one. Hopefully we have debunked, is sonic branding just a jingle? The little note I put down, by the way, is people assume it's just a catchy tune, but it's an entire audio identity that influences brand perception across multiple touch points. Ecosystem. We used that word yesterday and
sonic
absolutely loved it.
Ecosystem, app sounds, everything.
Yeah. So hope that's been interesting to everybody else. If you do want to get in touch and talk about some kind of strategy of some kind, do get in touch. We're happy to jump on a call for free. We're not going to charge you for that, just to have a conversation, meet new brands, meet new people. We just love nerding out about the topic as well. So even if that's as far as it goes, that's cool with us. Anything else you'd like to say, Luke?
Goodbye.
See you next week for number 2.
Bye.